The 2023-2024 NBA season was an outstanding year for the Minnesota Timberwolves. In round one of the Western Conference playoffs, we watched them sweep a team that consisted of Kevin Durant, Devin Booker, and Bradley Beal. They swept the Phoenix Suns. And then in round two of the Western Conference playoffs, I believe they gave us the most entertaining series out of all the playoff series, and that was their matchup against the Denver Nuggets, where they were able to complete a comeback on the road in a Game 7 to knock off the defending champs. And then we get to round three of the Western Conference playoffs, the Western Conference Finals, where they ultimately came up short against Luka, Kyrie, and the Dallas Mavericks. But nonetheless, this was still a great season for the Minnesota Timberwolves. I think it was very monumental, and they just took a huge step forward. As a franchise. So here we fast forward a couple of weeks later, and here we are in the offseason, and the Minnesota Timberwolves are figuring out how to improve their roster. And as great as their season was, there is always room for improvement. Now, the Minnesota Timberwolves last season, they were able to create a very strong identity on the defensive side of the basketball. We saw them put on some great defensive master classes in the Western Conference playoffs against some really good offensive teams. And they did finish the season number 1 in defensive rating, but they also finished number 16 in offensive rating. And I think in the third round of the playoffs, it kind of caught up to them. They just didn't have enough offensive firepower to match Luka, Kyrie, and the Dallas Mavericks. So here we are in the offseason. And you look at the Minnesota Timberwolves and you look at their situation, this is already a really good basketball team, and they have a lot of mouths to feed, especially when it comes to the type of players that they have and the type of money that these players demand in today's NBA game. They have a lot of high-value guys. You have Anthony Edwards, who's obviously the franchise, the future for the Minnesota Timberwolves. You have Rudy Gobert, who just won a Defensive Player of the Year award for the 4th time. He excels at blocking shots and grabbing rebounds. You have Karl Anthony Towns, who can give you 20 points every night to go along with 8, 9, 10 rebounds. And then they have some really good role players with Naz Reid and Jaden McDaniels. All of these guys are going to make a lot of money, and it's a lot of mouths to feed for the Minnesota Timberwolves. So this offseason cap space was not on their side, so they went out, and in my opinion, I think they made a really good deal with the San Antonio Spurs, and they got one of the bigger steals in this year's draft. They were able to take I know the 2 picks are from 2030 and 2031. One is an unprotected pick and one is a first-round protected pick, but they took these 2 picks and they were able to turn this into the 8th pick and to the 8th pick in this year's NBA draft, and that pick turned out to be Rob Dillingham. And before we get into what kind of prospect Rob Dillingham is, coming from OTE, coming out of the University of Kentucky, I just want to say that I love this trade for the Minnesota Timberwolves, and I love it for 2 reasons. Number 2, we don't really see a team this good be able to bring in talent out of the NBA draft lottery. We just saw the Minnesota Timberwolves. They just knocked off the defending champs, and they also got into the conference finals. So for them to be able to make a move and they don't give up none of their core pieces, none of their core guys, and gets them a lottery pick, you got to applaud them for that. And then also the picks that they gave up are kind of far away, 2030 and 2031. That's 5-6 years from now. I believe Anthony Edwards is 22, 23 years of age. He wouldn't even be into his 30s by that time. So I don't think the Minnesota Timberwolves, I don't think they're going to be too desperate for any type of lottery help in that stage, but you never know. And then also Rob Dillingham is a player that has tremendous upside. You never know, this might pay off. He could be a guy that is a perennial all-star each and every season. If you watch him play or seen any of his highlights, he does have that type of upside. But that's what we're going to get into. We're going to look at what kind of prospect Rob Dillingham is, and we're going to start with what he excels at. And the easiest way to describe Rob Dillingham as a basketball player, as a prospect, he's a walking bucket. When he played at high school, when he played with Overtime Elite, when he played at the University of Kentucky, he makes scoring the basketball look very easy. And the stuff that he's doing, they are very tough buckets, very impressive buckets, but it make he makes them look easy for him, if that makes sense. And we look at Rob Dillingham, we can start with his handle on the basketball. I think his handle is so elite. He has stop and go. He knows how to change his pace. He knows how to rock his defender to sleep and blow right past him. And then he also has the hezzy, one of the nastiest hezzies in basketball right now. And kids love Rob Dillingham. Like anybody from, I want to say probably the age of 25 and younger, they're huge fans of Rob Dillingham. He has a lot of swag to his game, but his handle is elite, and then his ability to score from all three levels. He can knock down the three-point shot off the catch, off the dribble. He can get to the mid-range area and knock down a jumper. And then also, he's a really strong finisher around the rim. He can finish in so many different ways. Despite him being 6'1", 6'2", he does not shy away from contact. Since the deeper he's gotten into his basketball career, he's pinned on muscle. You can see him at the University of Kentucky. That's probably where he's been at his strongest. He did a great job of finishing through contact. And then he also has NBA level finishes, being able to lay the ball up off the high glass, lay the ball up with some English on it. And then he has a really good floater to his game as well. Having the floater and being a smaller guard, we see how beneficial it has been for guys like Trae Young, guys like Chris Paul. That floater for a shorter guard in the NBA, it can be very elite, and Rob Dillingham has that to his game. And then his offensive game just flows really well. All of those things come together really well. His ability to handle the ball, his ability to shoot the ball, his ability to finish. He knows how to put those things all together, and he's one of the best ISO players in the country, the best ISO player in his class. So his ability to drive the basketball, his speed, his ability to shift, to use the hezzy, it just makes him a problem on the offensive side of the ball. He's also a really, really good playmaker. He can run the two-man game. He's not a selfish basketball player. He does not mind feeding his teammates and setting them up to be successful. And then he's just a basketball player that has a lot of swag. And I believe that's why he was traded from the San Antonio Spurs to the Minnesota Timberwolves, is because we never really seen nobody on the San Antonio Spurs with that type of their basketball game has that type of personality. We just look at them over the last few years. Kawhi Leonard, who was very fundamental. They have Wemby now, and then we know they had guys like Ginobili, Tony Parker, Tim Duncan. Those wasn't the flashiest guys. So that's my theory. That's the only reason why I think the San Antonio Spurs would be rebuilding and trade a talent like Rob Dillingham. But nonetheless, you know what they say, one man's trash is another man's treasure. And then of course with us evaluating the prospect that Rob Dillingham is, we got to look at some of the things that he doesn't excel at. And I'm not going to say that he's a bad defender. And I honestly think when it comes to the basketball and the NBA, a lot of these guys aren't bad defenders. They're just smaller players, and the skill level is just so elite nowadays. But if you watch Rob Dillingham, if you watch him at the University of Kentucky, he's a willing defender. He's not just going to let nobody give up no easy buckets. But we live in an age where every team is trying to get that perfect mismatch, and a lot of the times it's either getting a bigger player to guard a smaller player on the perimeter, or getting a smaller player to guard a bigger player in the paint. So teams are most likely going to try to hunt Rob Dillingham when he's out on the court, but teams have a way of hiding their worst defenders. We see it all the time, so I don't think that's something to stress about too much. And the Minnesota Timberwolves are elite on the defensive side of the ball, so he's going to have great defenders around him. And then some of the other things are just things that come with being a young basketball player. Like sometimes he might hold on to the basketball for too long. He might have a possession where he's doing too much dribbling, or he might have a possession where he tries to throw a flashy pass that his teammate wasn't ready for. But those are things you get better at with time, with working with NBA level professionals. So I'm not too worried about that. You look at the difference when Kyrie Irving, the way that he's played when he first came into the league, versus to the way that he plays now, it's two completely different players. And Kyrie is still as flashy, and he's still as flashy and as crazy as ever, but his game is very fundamentally sound now. So I think those are things that are going to get better with time. So I think this was an outstanding pickup for the Minnesota Timberwolves. The timeline is perfect. They have a veteran point guard in Mike Conley that Rob Dillingham can learn a lot from, and they're both around the same size, so he can teach him some tips, some instincts on the defensive side of the ball. So this is just a really good situation, I think, for Rob Dillingham and for the Minnesota Timberwolves. I think Rob is going to have an opportunity to come in and make an impact for a NBA team, but it's not going to be a lot of pressure on his shoulders to live to the expectations of being a the number 8 overall pick. He's going to have some time to grow and develop because he has a really good team backing him up. So that's my thoughts on this trade. I think it's a big time steal for the Minnesota Timberwolves, and in the long term, it can end up paying off crazy because Rob Dillingham, he has the upside to be a really nice offensive force in today's NBA. But that's going to be it for this video. If you guys enjoyed, please leave a like. Sorry if my eyes look a little low, man. I'm just getting off work. I'm super sleepy, but I wanted to get this recorded. But let me know what you think down in the comment section about Rob Dillingham. Let me know were the San Antonio Spurs, am I tripping, or are they tripping for trading Rob Dillingham? And then subscribe for more weekly content so you don't miss anything. And that's curtains.